I'd like to build one of these high impedance preamps called the PA0RDT Mini Whip. There are many of them out there. You can even buy them on Amazon. I'd like to design one up that would be versatile to run on batteries or phantom power via the coax. So this is the schematic I'm going to start with and go from there. This is the power feed circuit from the original design that feeds DC into the coax, blocks it from the receiver, and sends the DC on to the preamp. And it will come in the coax and be filtered, so signal will not end up back here on the power supply. It'll be filtered, and then you'll have pure DC back to feed the transistors. I made a few changes to the schematic already here. Changed a couple values. I'm going with a 5179, an MMBR 5179 surface mount, and J310 surface mount. Put a little protection here in the front with a couple of low capacitance back-to-back diodes. Going with a 1 millihenry choke in series with a 100 microhenry choke. I'll talk about that a little later. And there's a couple changes here at the input. So we'll come up with a full-fledged schematic here in a second. Okay, I have a schematic drawn up of the high impedance antenna circuit. I have protection here I've added from the original design with these back-to-back diodes to kind of keep static charges and so on from getting to the gate of this FET here in the front end. Still maintaining the same bias network. Then we're cap coupling that into the emitter follower stage for converting the impedance down to 50 ohms or thereabouts. The DC feed circuit is somewhat complex because I want the same PC board to operate either from a 9-volt battery or from phantom power via the coax. So that's what this network is here. To filter out the DC from the signal path, there's actually two inductors. One is a somewhat large 1000 microhenry, and the second one in series is a 68 microhenry. The reason two are in series is because the 1000 microhenry has enough capacitance from one end to the other that it could actually start to short some of the signal path to ground via these caps. So this 68 is basically here just to eliminate that extra capacitance here. Across the 68 is very, very low capacitance, so the series capacitance here is dropped quite a bit. So I actually used two inductors here. Then these capacitors filter any residual signal to ground. So we should end up with a pretty pure DC here. Looking at the battery feed circuit, there's a 9-volt battery on the PC board. It'll be mounted on the rear side when we design the PC board. This transistor turns the battery power on when an impedance is seen across the input jack here. This is for battery only operation, so we're not doing phantom power, so none of this circuitry here would be in use. My R70 receiver on its receive input on the back of it didn't have any impedance here, so I actually put a 10K resistor at the connector just to give some impedance. So really what's going on here is this thing can automatically be powered down by disconnecting the receiver. So you need some kind of impedance here to turn the battery on. It can be 10K or so on, so it wouldn't affect the actual signal here. That's why this resistor is not placed. Otherwise, if this is placed, the battery would be on all the time. Okay, so this resistor here, R14, kind of represents what should be on the receive end. Some receivers may have a coil or transformer there, so you automatically have a DC path to turn this transistor on, but some don't. But anyway, I wanted this to automatically turn on when a connection is made here. So that's what this is all about. If you're not using the 9 volt, then DC comes in here and it gets filtered here, as I talked about before. This circuit here is the injection circuit. This is where you inject the 12 volts DC into the coaxial cable to feed the preamp. And it has the same network here basically as this up here with the 1000 microhenry in series with the 68. You're blocking DC basically between the receiver and the preamp and phantom powering 12 volts into the coax, which feeds out to the preamp and back up here, and then filtered, and then pure DC is back on the power supply here for the preamp. So this is a separate circuit at the receive end of the coax. Actually, it could be anywhere in the coax. That's what will power the unit. I made separate schematics, one for the battery power, one for the phantom power. So the battery power just needs this circuitry here, the battery, the Q3 transistor. You can remove CR1 if need be and just place a 0 ohm for R15, or CR1 can be placed. So that's not an issue really there. But anyway, this circuitry here is for the battery circuit. If you're going to phantom power it, we don't need the battery circuit anymore. Then we install L1, L2, CR2. Down here there'll be a separate module for the injection of DC into the coaxial cable. So that's this bottom circuit here. This is the bill of material for the surface mount parts and the battery holder and so on for the board. So I'll be making a DigiKey order for these parts. Here's the PCB layout I made for the active antenna. It's all one board. We'll cut it right here when we receive the boards. This bottom section is the DC injector for phantom power, the injection circuit for the DC, and that will go into a small box that will go in series with the coaxial cable. This is the preamp section here, the active antenna, all surface mount. The top of the board here is the antenna section, which is just a series of back and forth traces etched into the board. It can be cut off right here if an external antenna is needed. This pad layout here is for an SMA connector. At the bottom, there's also an SMA connector here. In fact, all of the boards are set up for SMA, although probably we'll be using something different. I'll probably use an F connector actually in the coax. So this SMA here will probably become an F connector. Here's the blank board from the manufacturer. It's all surface mount pretty much except for the connectors and a couple of capacitors. There's the antenna section of the board. And on the back here is where the battery, the 9 volt battery, will mount. This is a finished board, all the parts mounted. I'm going to start by assembling a phantom powered outside unit to test out. I'm going to use a BNC connector that will protrude out the PVC end cap much easier than the SMA or even an F connector. So we'll go with the BNC at the preamp end. I was able to get this BNC connector to solder onto the board, even though the board was laid out for an SMA, and it comes out of the cap pretty well. I'll be putting some silicone on there when I finally put it all together, keep the water out. On the whip antenna end, I threaded in a bolt, stainless steel bolt, and that will be where the whip will connect to. The whip will only be about maybe 2.5 feet, 3 feet long at the most, and it'll go under the wing nut there. And the end cap there is ready to go. Now this is the DC phantom power circuit, filter circuit that will apply DC to the board via the coax. This is one that's built up with SMA connectors I'll use in another project. But this is what the board looks like with the SMAs. And this is the board with the BNC. Also, there's an LED that I glued into the bottom of the cap. So from the outside you can see that phantom power is being delivered to the preamp. Okay, we have the preamp secured in the end cap on the coax end of the preamp, and now we'll solder on the antenna side to the printed circuit board, and then that wing nut bolt will be where we connect the antenna. So we'll put everything together now, and we're going to start testing just on the bench just to make sure everything is working, because eventually it's all going to be glued together and you won't be able to ever get it apart again unless you saw it apart. So it'll be put together for good.
Chuck, I am shocked. Clark Griswold almost made my list. I just wanted to bring that.
No, he wouldn't make my list.
That's a good dad. And you know, almost made my list was Dennis Hopper, the dad in True Romance.
A lot of people like that. Yeah, it's a good one too.
Thanks for listening to Movie Maniacs. Download one of our.
Well, it looks like we're past the bench test here. It seems to be quite sensitive. Before gluing it back together, I'm going to put this moisture absorbing pack inside. Now it's all glued together, and I've taken it outside here, and we're going to put it on a piece of pipe and give it a bit of a test. I'm using galvanized electric fence wire for the whip, 2 pieces twisted together, and it seems to be stiff enough to hold its own.
In terms of off hours, you can't prepare, but I will tell you.
I remember this someone ago. Have you ever not had drinks with Andy Murray? I go, yeah, there was one.
Houston 10 WBHHP, no traffic and no comment. And Larry KD8HJJ, no traffic. Anyone else Akron, Canton, Nashville?
I got the antenna in the basement. It was storming. Hey, I will talk to you about it.
Yo, the dog pound gangster. Hey, young Sue. Damn, my wife think good thing. How's the shoes? Did he go get that titty massage?
There seems to be quite a bit of noise by the house, so I moved it down to the lakefront off the shed. There's very little electronics, such as wall warts and things, making noise down there. So I'll try it there. Okay, this is the antenna under test. This is a daytime test here. We're picking up beacons here at 380 kilohertz. This is the lower broadcast band.
AM 560, the answer.
Get anything to eat for days. Sometimes you're able to buy food for the whole day. Sometimes.
Reaction like that. But of course, we...
Okay, I stumbled with you a little bit. Victor Delta Zulu, I got that.
Here's 40 meters.
Okay, Whiskey 2, Victor Delta Zulu. You're 5'9".
And at 9 megahertz, get the time clock.
Kilo November 6, Kilo India.
Here's 20 meters.
6 Kilo India, 55, Louisiana, Roger. Roger, US 55, California.
And here, of course, is the CB band. You always find something there.
Right about 19, and goes down to the bowl. I don't know what I even do. I've actually tuned up
Radar counts
use the
over at the same time.
Helicrafters S38 and do a little bit of nighttime. We're on the broadcast band right now. However, there's a light dimmer on someplace. It's buzzing into the radio.
Match point.
What he's meant to you wins win. Iowa Lottery. Be a VIP with the Iowa Lottery. Visit.
I didn't know.
My job is to understand what benefit.
And a couple other times, I position those equally in a triangular position.
Here's a 75 meter band on some AM operators operating here.
So it worked out pretty good for at least an 80 minutes.
And here's some shortwave. Between 9 and 12 megahertz.
That is ruled over by Satan and the God.
Born to run. We're born to bring you all the music. Imagine. I'm Leonard W. or GMI.
Y así deben ser, y así debe notarlo la ciudadanía para acercarnos.
La trama, el tema es una serie de comedia en la cual
Now I'm going to build up a battery-powered preamp, and this one will be the portable version using the internal antenna. This one also will have the SMA connector on it and a short SMA pigtail, which will come down to the base of the mounting unit. First, I'll do a quick check of the automatic power-up part of the circuit here. Make sure the LED comes on. The PVC base is where I put a BNC connector, and the pigtail of the board will fit down inside the PVC pipe. There's a small piece of PVC inside that's glued in to keep the board from falling down any farther, so it spaces it up to the top pretty good. And then the PVC goes together after putting the pigtail down into the base, like so. Later I added the LED and a switch to the bottom. So now we're going to try testing it with the THF6HT, which has a wideband receiver in it. We'll see what happens here. Brought the radio and the preamp antenna down to the lakefront to get away from most of the noise that's around the house. Lots of wind noise though, lots of wind noise, so kind of tune that out if possible. But went through a few bands on the THF6 here just to see what the antenna would pull in down here by the lake.
This is a really difficult time.
Take the time to check this out. It's amazingly easy to park it.
13621 83 corner. Time to check the schedule of games coming up. Glory to God. Those that are opening in mercy.
Eso lo hemos visto. Like a drunkard, it shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it.
So, this is Jim over here in St. Charles. I got 46 degrees, 46. And it's going to be a decent day.
Nipple, and he gonna have reindeer nipples next, no doubt about it. Good evening, good afternoon to you, David T, number 13 man, and Triple Two, your boy.
Desire, but you can always check into our net. Okay, any more mobile or portable GX first timers?
for us and hand us a pension, and Social Security was tax-free.
So all in all, it looks like the active antenna is working pretty good in the portable mode and in the fixed mode.